It seems like every time we think the conversations about Melody Sherry and Martel Holt are over, their names get brought right back into the mix again. Most recently, we are seeing LaTisha, once again, finding herself in a situation where she is digging up the past, revisiting old narratives, and creating this cycle of revisionist history that continues to stir discourse. What is really striking about this is that we are years removed from Melody and Martel's marriage, years removed from the beginnings of the show, and yet, here we are again. People are still attaching themselves to Mel's story instead of moving forward with their own. It raises the question, why is it so hard for the cast members to let go of the past and stop making Mel the center of their discussions? This time, the situation comes out of a DJ Richie Sky interview. Now, whether this was a brand new conversation or whether it was an old clip resurfaced, the impact is the same. With DJ Richie Sky's platform being as large as it is, anything discussed in this interview is naturally going to gain attention, create buzz, and stir reactions across the fan base. The specific question DJ Richie Sky asked LaTisha was simple: how is your friendship with Mel? Do you think the show deteriorated your friendship? And what is your relationship with Mel now? These were very direct and very present-day questions. They weren't about what happened 5, 6, or even 7 years ago. They were about today. But instead of answering those direct questions, LaTisha did what she and others often do: she went all the way back to the beginning. Instead of saying whether she and Melody are on good terms now, she wanted to rewind back to the early seasons of the show, back when Mel and Martel were married, back when everyone was still trying to figure out their friendships and their roles on the show. And this is where the problem begins, because rather than moving forward and addressing the actual state of things now, she drags us all back into the same old conversations that the audience has been hearing for years. The frustration comes from the fact that these interviews always end up revolving around Melody. Every time a cast member is on the hot seat, every time they have a chance to stand in their own light and take accountability for their own storylines, the conversation somehow shifts back to Mel. It becomes about her marriage, her divorce, and the things that happened long before. And this cycle has been ongoing for over 5 years now. Melody and Martel have been divorced for more than half a decade, and yet their marriage is still being used as a focal point of discussion. That alone shows just how much people rely on rehashing that story instead of owning their own narratives. LaTisha brought up the idea of some kind of pact, an agreement between the couples not to expose the realities of what was going on in their marriages. But let's be clear about this: it wasn't Melody pushing that. If Melody had been part of such a pact, the issues in her marriage would have never come out on the show in the first place. It was Martel who pushed for silence. It was Martel who didn't want his cheating and his indiscretions to come out because that would ruin the image he wanted to present. Martel, not Melody, was invested in protecting the illusion of a picture-perfect marriage. Kimmy even said herself that Melody was never part of this pact. That should have been the end of the discussion. But instead, Martel's friends, because let's remember, these were Martel's friends first, not Melody's, chose to take his word as truth. They took his perspective as the gospel and used that to push a narrative that Melody had agreed to silence. Of course Martel didn't want his cheating exposed. He had allegedly gotten another woman pregnant more than once, and that kind of scandal was never going to sit well for his image. But again, this wasn't Melody's doing. This was Martel's cover-up. And even if the cheating hadn't been exposed, let's not act like the Scotts and others weren't already throwing shade at Melody from the very beginning. Season 1 gave us plenty of examples. Kimmy was making comments about Melody being a post-queen, constantly online, as if that was a negative. There were jabs about Mel and Martel being a so-called power couple, with shade thrown at the idea that they weren't really living up to that image. Even when nothing about the cheating was front and center, there was still shade, judgment, and negativity aimed at Mel. It's interesting to see how much things have shifted over time. The very same people who once criticized Mel for being so present on social media are now doing the same things themselves. They are the ones constantly going live, promoting their businesses online, pushing for support, and trying to grow their own platforms. They are the ones who now rely on YouTube and Instagram to connect with fans and keep their brands alive. But when Melody was doing it, she was labeled as extra, as if her way of promoting herself and her business was somehow wrong. And here's the bigger picture: LaTisha once leaned on Melody for connections, guidance, and support. She wanted access to MEL's network, to the opportunities and resources that MEL could connect her with for charity and business projects. But once she got what she wanted, the relationship shifted. Suddenly, things Melody said were twisted and retold in ways that caused confusion, shade, and negativity. Instead of appreciating the help and opportunities, LaTisha seemed to use those moments as ammunition to create drama. The pattern becomes clear: anytime MEL tries to move forward, someone else pulls the past back into the spotlight. And when MEL finally responds, when she pulls out her famous red phone with receipts to prove the truth, suddenly she becomes the villain. She's accused of being bitter, of not moving on, of always wanting to be the center of attention. But the reality is, she only brings those receipts because people continue to spread false stories and drag her name through the mud. It is exhausting for the viewers and for MEL herself. How many times can we go through the same cycle of blame, shade, and revisionist history? And why, after all these years, do people still struggle to simply answer questions about their current relationship with her? When asked directly, "Are you and Melody friends now? Did the show damage your friendship?" the answer should be straightforward. Either you're cool or you're not. Either the friendship is intact or it isn't. There's no need to go back to yesteryear, no need to relive the trips, the vacations, and the time spent together before everything went downhill. We already know that story. We've seen it play out season after season. The irony of it all is that the same people who claim the show doesn't need Melody are the ones constantly bringing her up. They say the show can thrive without her, yet they can't stop making her a topic of discussion. If the show was truly fine without MEL, then why is her name always in their mouths? Why do interviews, conversations, and storylines still circle back to her, even when she isn't the one on camera? The reality is, Melody remains the central figure whether they want to admit it or not. And fans see through this. They see the hypocrisy of trying to erase Melody while simultaneously relying on her name for attention and storylines. They see the contradictions in criticizing her while mimicking the same behaviors she was once dragged for. They see how the same people who once had little to contribute to the show are only still relevant because they continue to use MEL's past as their anchor. The real question is, when will this end? When will accountability come into play? Instead of revisiting Melody and Martel's marriage from years ago, why not talk about what's happening now in your own household? Why not address the issues currently affecting your marriage, your business, or your friendships? Deflecting back to MEL doesn't erase your problems. It just shows that you're unwilling to confront them head-on. This cycle of revisiting the past and rewriting history is exactly what prevents growth. It locks everyone in the same repetitive storylines, creating drama where there doesn't need to be any. Melody has been divorced for years, Martel has moved on with someone else, and yet their names are still being used as shields by others who don't want to face their own realities. At some point, the cast has to ask themselves, what is the endgame? What is the purpose of continuously blaming MEL? The truth is, Melody's independence bothers people. Her ability to separate herself from Martel, her ability to build her own path, and her ability to stand strong in the face of constant shade, it all highlights the weaknesses of those who still rely on her story to define themselves. And that's why her name won't leave their mouths. Because if they stop talking about her, they would have to actually face their own stories, their own shortcomings, and their own lack of accountability.